Hey guys, welcome to my review. So in this review, I just want to talk you guys through and answer a question that some of my viewers have long been asking me, which is what is in a DAP, Sajid? Like, do DAPs make a difference? So even my viewers who understand that sources make a difference often wonder about DAPs. And I've recently had the pleasure of having tried many DAPs. Like, I don't have the pictures that I took with me in front of me right now, but these are some of the DAPs I've tried in images from the internet. The Cayin N8 Mark II. This is another picture of the N8 Mark II, the Astell Kern SP2000, the Astell Kern SP3000 again, Cayin M9, and of course the iBasso DX320X, which is just a beautiful looking DAP. So yeah, I just wanted to, having tried all these Android DAPs that I'll, do a written review of soon, and I have my own pictures, of course. Just for convenience, I'm showing you pictures of the internet. And these are DAPs I personally happen to own right now. The Astell Kern SP2000T, which has 3 modes: tube, solid state, op amp, and hybrid mode. The Cayin N6 Mark II, which is the cheapest of the bunch here, but it still holds its own, honestly. And finally, the Sony WM1ZM2, my favorite DAP right now. The latest flagship from Sony, a wonderful DAP. This has Android functionality. So yeah, to jump right in, guys. Like IEMs, DAPs have come a long way over the last few years and have become as important to portable audio as, full-size stacks and amps are to headphone enthusiasts. Like I personally, like I said, I've owned or tried a lot of Android-based flagship DAPs for the last several months. So a quick disclaimer, guys. I do want to say that once you go past a certain price point with DAPs, like the differences do become razor thin. They're listenable. They're perceptible. And once you hear a difference between a Cayin and an Astell Kern, or an Astell Kern and a Sony, you might never want to go back, which is what happened with me. So like when I was A-Bing between my SP2000T, which comes in at $2,500, and the Sony, which comes in at $3,600, $1,200 more, I wanted to not like this more than the one that I owned. I wanted to save money like most of you. Or perhaps all of you. But I honestly, once I'd heard the Sony, I kept going back and A-Bing between the Sony and the AK. And finally, I just couldn't unlisten what I'd heard. But when I listened for the first time, or even for the first 2 times, I would be hard pressed to say, the differences honestly were not night and day. There were small, but sort of like deal-breaking differences between these DAPs. I do want to mention that. So to my subjective tastes, these differences are small, minute even, but massive in their own way. But for you, they could just be small differences. So that's worth keeping in mind. Guys, so I'll just first talk about the Cayin, which is the cheapest DAP I have in my possession. And this is about $1,200. So this is interesting because this has swappable modules, guys. I have tried the A01, the T01, T02. And currently it's got R01 installed, which is an R2R module. The one that I'll discuss is the R2R module, the R01 that's inside this, because that's, I think, the best sort of module that this comes with, or this can sort of house. The R2R implementation of the Cayin N6 Mark II is a bit different from the usual sound characteristics that people associate with R2R, in that it's not warm or lush, guys. It's not as analog sounding as other DAPs I've heard, even at different or lower price points. I want to say this Cayin N6 Mark II is neutral bright, far more neutral bright than it's the updated flagship, the Cayin N8 Mark II. This is actually neutral bright done right in many ways. The details here and technicalities are amazing. That's something I give mad props to this DAP for. It is like 90% or maybe 95% of the other flagship DAPs in terms of detail and technical performance. But again, like I said, the last 5% can make or break an experience. It's a fantastic DAP. It's a snappy UI. It's of course Android enabled, very compact form factor, and it does synergize extremely well with my Aroma Audio Dual, which has a bit of a relaxed sort of thing going on when it comes to pinna gain and lower treble. So because the guys here, the Aroma Audio Dual, are, like I said, a bit relaxed in terms of pinna gain and lower treble, they pair really well with the Cayin. A lot of my friends have noticed how the Cayin N6 Mark II has the effect of boosting the upper mids. So this requires an upper mids boost, which works really well with the Cayin DAP. and it adds a bit of grit to the treble, because the treble can be somewhat, I don't want to say it's a gritty treble. It is a resolving treble. It is not the smoothest, but that is not necessarily a bad thing, because it does pair well with the treble that requires some grit, like the one here. So, but see, I wouldn't pair the Cayin N6 Mark II with something like the Empire Ears Legend Evos, which have a shouty upper mid-range. Or for that matter, I wouldn't pair this with the Odins from Empire Ears, because they also have somewhat of a forward upper mid-range. So synergy map makes a huge difference, guys. So that's worth keeping in mind. A very quick discussion on the Cayin N8 Mark II, which, you know, like I've tried, like I've said, but I don't have in front of me. I've taken pictures myself, but I'll just take you guys through some internet pictures. So this DAP has a dual ROHMS ROMs DAC, Korg new tubes of various, you know, nifty features with which you can, you know, add filters to the sound. So a bit beyond the tube mode and the solid state mode, you have the P plus power mode, and you have like 4 or 5 permutations you can, you know, sort of, you know, flip through or permutate into. Android 9, it's quite powerful between P and P plus. I think you can get all the way up to something close to 750 milliwatts at 32 ohms and 1200 milliwatts, or 1.2 watts at 16 ohms. So through the balanced headphone out. I do want to say that the form factor wasn't for me. Like, you see some of these lines and curves that I feel like were not very ergonomic for me to hold. So this needed a cover very much when I tried this. I was not a fan of this very blingy volume dial. This just wasn't my thing. And the headphone connector, the headphone outputs are at the bottom, which was a bit weird for me because I'm used to having headphones output at the top. It's a bit of a chunky boy, this guy. So it's thicker than it's wider. So I mean, it's wider than thicker, of course, but it's thicker than I prefer my DAPs to be. So that was another issue with this DAP. And overall, the sound-wise, it does improve the N6 Mark II significantly in many ways, but it doesn't necessarily give me the sound that I need in my stable. The Cayin N8 Mark II, some people are saying is neutral bright, and that could well be the case if you have not tried the N6 Mark II, because the N6 Mark II is more neutral bright. The N8 sounds lusher, even of the solid state mode, than the N6 Mark II. It's more resolving, of course. But overall, guys, it just wasn't my cup of tea, the N8 Mark II, because that wasn't the sound I was looking for. But you know, a lot of people like it. A lot of people think it looks very premium and feels premium. So you know, so that's there. Now moving on to the AK SP2000T, which is a DAP I've owned for the longest time. I've never thought I'd sell it, but I have a buyer for this now. I'm only selling this because I've bought the Sony recently. So not the best experience when it comes to you know, user interface and all that, but you know, it is an AK DAP. An AK DAP sort of bridges the gap between, you know, a pure Android DAP like an iBasso in some cases and some of the non-streaming DAPs, and they do sound very good. This SP2000T in particular also looks very good. It's light. It has a large screen size, or you know, a relatively large screen size. This part lights up in a very Cyclops-y kind of way that shows you the sample rate of the track that you're playing. It's, you know, it's good to hold. It's got nice leather covers that I've bought for it. It's got ES9068 AS, a quad ESS DAC arrangement. It's fairly powerful. I think 6 VRMS from balanced and you know, Korg new tube 6P1. It's got 3 modes: hybrid mode and, you know, solid state mode and all that, which you can flip through like this, hybrid tube and op amp. They're very nifty DAPs. So what happens with this house sound of AK? I feel like it's AK sounds transparent, but they have their own sort of twist on transparency. So they have a way of sort of pushing back the mid-range, or the vocals rather, and sort of pushing forward the instrument. So this has the sort of opposite effect on your IEMs than the Cayin N6 Mark II does, right? So if you have a shouty IEM, or an IEM with shouty upper mids like an Odin or Legend Evo, this is the DAP you turn to, because this has the effect of reining in the upper mids, because the vocals are pushed back on this, instruments are forward. This does not have the blackest background, I feel. A few other DAPs do. Like, you know, the SP2000 definitely has a blacker background than the SP2000T, and the SP3000 has a blacker background, but this is slightly warmer and lusher than the SP2000, and the SP3000, however, does do warm and lush pretty well. In many ways, the SP3000 marries what's good about the SP2000 and the SP2000T, so that's worth keeping in mind. However, I do want to say that overall, this sound was very much to my liking. I loved it. for the longest time. The relative lack of blackness of background wasn't a deal breaker for me. I loved pairing it with the IMs that I mentioned. I wasn't ultimately the biggest fan of the SP3000 because the SP3000 is so much heavier, is so much chunkier than this or any other flagship DAP that I've tried, that I've decided the SP3000 wasn't going to be for me. So that's worth keeping in mind. I also want to say another thing that you want to notice about, AK DAPs that I don't think people have talked about as much is AK DAPs don't do bass as well. So let me qualify that. They have a very different take on bass. So their bass of AK DAPs are somewhat textured. So you do get a certain sense of texture, or if someone wanted to be critical, they don't have as tight a bass as Sony DAPs do, or even iBasso DX320 does. And I'm saying this, guys, with no bias against AK. I've for the longest time been I've loved the SP2000T here, but having tried the 2000T, the 2000, and the 3000, they lack the last bit of bass depth, impact, and tightness compared to, I want to say, an M9, a DX320X, a Sony WM1ZM2, or a Cayin N8 Mark II. Even the N6 Mark II has a stronger, deeper bass than the SP2000T or the SP2000 even. So that's just something controversial that I just wanted to get out there. But that's what it is. They do pair really well though. Like they have an extended airy treble, so they do pair really well with something like Legend Evo. Extremely well, in fact. But yeah, I mean, they can be laggy because the weak archaic sort of software and all that. So that's worth keeping in mind. The SP3000 wasn't for me because I didn't think it was a massive improvement over the SP2000T or the SP2000. The SP3000 also is, it's stunning to behold. It's got much better aesthetics in my eyes than the Cayin N8 Mark II. The stainless steel stuff going on and the volume dial here is actually very sexy. So this stuff is awesome to look at, guys. But however, I honestly wouldn't buy this because, it was just too heavy for me. And the overall SQ, the sound quality improvement, wasn't as significant to my ears compared to the other DAPs. So that was something. The Shanling M9, I do want to say, was an amazing DAP, which I really wrestled with the idea of buying. But I realized that I could EQ this to bring about the good features of this. So the M9, for one, looks super sleek, very, very beautiful looking. I love, the sort of curved lines and all that. It's nice to hold. It's not super heavy. I wasn't a big fan of the leather cover. It looks kind of cheap. And I wasn't a fan of the shape of the leather cover, but, it just feels amazing in the hands. Great to use, great sound. This sounds like Delta Sigma done right. So some people are saying the M9 is warm. So my definition of warm is that overall the sound signature has to be clockwise tilted for it to be warm, which wasn't the case for this. I don't think this makes the sound signature more clockwise tilted than it is. I think what people are perhaps meant to say is that it's a very bassy DAP. It's a very bassy DAP, so maybe that warm people talk about it comes from the fact that they think it's bassy. However, the M9 also has a very extended treble, so it does have a certain thinness to the sound. A very slight, ever so slight relative thinness that perhaps the other flagship DAPs don't have, but it's ever so slight, and it's only visible or perceptible when you A/B. I do want to say the M9 is a wonderful DAP. It has AK449 EQ DAC chip, which of course became rather rare after the AKM fire. Interchangeable output ports supporting 2.5, 3.5, 4.4 outputs, and it's fairly powerful. It's I think 920 milliwatts at 32 ohm through its balanced. But a standout performer, guys. The M9 is a wonderful DAP. I do know that some people were disappointed because the specs are quite similar to the M8, but it does sound better than the M8 to me. It's better tuned. It's got way better bass extension than the M8 does. So that's worth keeping in mind if you're wondering if you should upgrade from the M8 to the M9. Finally, guys, I do want to very quickly talk about, before moving on to the Sony that I own, the iBasso DX320, which is another DAP that I've considered buying. I've A/B'd this with the others for a long time. The first thing is that this is perhaps the sexiest looking DAP out there aside from the Sony. I just love its shape and design. It's got these wonderful lines. They call it a liquid metal finish or something. Just for looks alone, I would buy this. And it's quite powerful. I think it's about 1200 milliwatts of 32 ohms. This also, like the Cayin, has ROM DAC chips. And it's just a wonderful smartphone like sleek design that I feel like a lot of people are going to find very good looking. It's got an amazing bass. It's a warm presentation. It's interesting because the treble feels extended, but it has a way of reining in airy or very two extended trebles that are perhaps peaky. So the Noble Viking Ragnar, which I feel like can destroy the listening experience of even the most ardent treble head if you do not have a warm source, because the Ragnar is just crazy in its treble, was somehow tamed by this. So the Ragnar sounded transparent, lucid, and bassy, and bassier than the Ragnar has on any other DAP. So this is like an amazing pairing with the Ragnar that I just want to do a shout out for. And its build quality is exquisite. So yeah, so that's all I have for the iBasso DX320X, guys. I have AB'd the 320X with the 320, and I think the 320X and the 320 sound the same. Although iBasso claims that the 320X, because of the better housing, perhaps sounds different, which wasn't the case in my experience. Finally, last but not the least, my favorite DAP of all DAPs that I've tried. Disclaimer is I have not tried a Hibby RS8, the latest R2R DAP from Hibby. So keep that in mind. I love the Android functionality here. It's honestly, this DAP is in a class of its own. I think this has perhaps the best bass production among all the DAPs that I've tried, because it marries bass, depth, impact, texture really well. It tames the upper mid range of a lot of shouty IEMs. It does have very nice air and extension. When I first listened to the Sony, it was sounding slightly darker, but I think it's opened up a lot, and it doesn't sound as dark as the previous version, the WM1ZM1. It does have the most amazing EQ, not in its sort of how feature rich it is, because it's not a parametric EQ, but it's a wonderful EQ in the sense that if you EQ your IEMs with this, there's absolutely no fuzziness, no distortion whatsoever. And the blackness of background for this DAP is just amazing. And some of you will know that Sony just does not hold back when it comes to internals. It's just got the finest materials, whether it's PCB, capacitors, the whole chassis, for instance. The chassis is 99% OFC copper. All the internal wiring is done by Kimber cables. Aesthetics wise, of course, it's just very refined. It does feel a bit more like, to me, like it's more luxurious than other DAPs, and much more so than the Cayin N8 Mark II in my mind, because the Cayin N8 Mark II was a bit tacky, I think, and not ostentatious in the right way. I don't mind the gold bling here, honestly. I don't think it looks as ostentatious as it might appear. I think it just looks tasteful, and it's tastefully done, the gold, which can be tricky. And yeah, I mean, guys, this to me is amazing. And I do EQ this though with a lot of IEMs, because when I EQ this with the Aroma Audio Jewel, this becomes just a living legend. Because I do boost the upper mids a bit, add a bit more air, and add a bit more bass, and this becomes amazing. I use this with the Odins without any EQ. It's amazing with the Unique Melody Mark IIs, and the Visionaries VE7 with EQ is just phenomenal with the Sony DAP. So that's it, guys. The Sony DAP is my favorite, and DAPs do make a difference. They're minuscule, marginal, razor thin, but once you've heard them, especially in my case, it's impossible to unhear the differences. But it does sometimes take a bit of time to appreciate the differences. So if someone sat you down and you were A-Bing between this and this, you might not, first of all, notice the differences right away. I think I did, but not everyone does. I know this because some of my friends did not. But even some of these friends, after they A-B'd this over several days, they came to the conclusion that they couldn't unhear what they heard on this, because this does sound better. So once you take something away from a chain, that's sometimes when you perhaps miss it more. So after A-B'ing these two for several days, I was missing this a lot, and I wasn't just able to listen to this anymore. So I decided to go and pull the trigger, and I bought the Sony WM1ZM2. And like I said, I've also listened to the other Android-based apps before deciding to buy this. So a lot of very good DAPs out there, guys. You take your pick in terms of whatever sound signature you're looking for and whatever synergies you're trying to achieve. But the Sony WM1ZM2 happens to be my current favorite. So that's that. So thank you for watching this video. If you want more of these videos on DAPs and sources, do let me know. Or any suggestions you may have for future videos. I'd be very happy to hear your views and take your feedback, and hope to engage you in my comment section. So that's it from me, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye.